Hiya guys, Buildzoid here, and this is the actually hardcore overclocking news thing. I have no idea what to call it yet. It's gonna be a bit like, I'm gonna answer some questions, gonna go over some hardware news, and update you on sort of going-ons at the channel. Which really is stuff going on in my life as related to the channel, because I'm kind of the only person who runs this thing, but yeah. So first things first, let's get all the channel news out of the way. Well, channel news. Well, the channel's growing. That's a good thing. We're almost at 10,000 subscribers. Kind of arbitrary number, but hey, people give it significance. The more important, but nonetheless still arbitrary number, I think, is that there's over 100 videos on the channel now. So if you're bored, you know, you can go watch those. There's like hours and hours of content there. And over 30 of those videos, well, no, almost 30 of those videos are PCB breakdowns for GPUs. You can find all of those in the PCB breakdown playlist, which I just sort of recently realized people apparently don't know that it exists. So it is very much worth checking that playlist out, because all the PCB breakdowns for this channel are there, and all the PCB breakdowns I've done for Gamers Nexus are also in there. So if you don't know that I do contract work for Gamers Nexus, where I basically do PCB breakdowns like I do for my channel, except I don't ever do Volt mods and sort of more advanced stuff for theirs, you can find that all in a playlist. There's over 30 of them. I really recommend checking that playlist before making any requests, because there's a good chance some of those cards are already in there. Like recently I got a ton of requests for the R9 295X2. That's one of the cards I've already covered. You can find it in the playlist. So that's, you know, that's that sort of. Other than that, there's still no Kaby Lake CPUs in my hands. That's pretty much what I can tell you. Ryzen, I've pre-ordered my R7 1700 non-X, because AHOC budget would... Well, I mean, the Ace, like, I could go and buy like an 1800X or something, but the problem with me doing that is then I couldn't actually fund anything else. And so basically I'm just buying an R7 1700 because that's the cheapest 8-core, so I can still use it for, you know, testing how well motherboards deal with it, because I've heard from other people who already have Ryzen CPUs that there are problems with motherboard VRMs on the lower end stuff. If you put an 8-core Ryzen in a low end board, it's not going to overclock very well, because it's going to hammer the VRM. Interestingly enough, I think I found a site which provides decent quality VRM pictures, so I might do a few motherboard breakdowns here and there that aren't of motherboards I own, but is going to be problematic anyway. So that's sort of that as far as Ryzen is concerned. Well, not really that. Personally for Ryzen, I'm looking into getting a Gigabyte Gaming 5. That also might end up pre-ordered, or depending on how things go, I might not have to pre-order it. Really depends, but that board seems to be sort of a really happy... Like, I've actually seen the VRM for that board. It's interesting, which I think we'll cover. If I get that board, then we'll cover that VRM in more detail, and you'll see why I'm saying it's interesting right now. I'm not gonna... It's not bad because, well, I've decided I'm gonna get that board, but it's interesting. So we'll take a look at that for sure, because on the off chance that I don't get a free sample of that, which I'm really hoping to get a sample of that board, I can go buy that one. It's not really that expensive. And then, of course, once I have that, Ryzen is going on LN2. So that's going to be awesome. And yeah, so that's what you have to look forward to. I hope to be streaming all of that sometime in... well, my Ryzen CPU is arriving on the 8th of March. So before the 8th of March, I can't really do anything. And after the 8th of March, depends on when the motherboard gets here. So, yeah. So that's all you need to know about Ryzen right now. I'm very excited to play with it, but don't have it. So, yeah. Now then, other stuff. I did not think this through. I mean, that's really probably all you really care about. Oh, right, no. I did say a while ago that I want to get another RX 480 to test. That's been canceled just because stuff is not working out the way I expected. Related to sort of RAM and KB Lake and... Yeah, RAM and KB Lake. That's currently a big problem because I don't actually have any proper high-end DDR4, so I've wanted to do a video on, like, DDR4 overclocking and, like, how super far you can push it. But that's hard to do when your best memory kit only does 3400, 13, and needs 1.9 volts to do it. So, yeah. Struggles of the channel. And, yeah. So, that's a bit of an issue, but hopefully I'll be able to work around that. The real problem there is that high-end DDR4 costs about as much as a GPU, which is why the RX 480 is currently, like, the acquisition of another RX 480 is currently on hold. Because, I might need to buy RAM that costs as much as an RX 480 if something doesn't change soon. So, yeah, that's problematic. But I don't think it's a huge deal. I mean, DDR4 is going to be around for a while, so I can just release the guide later. Or release the video about it later, or maybe eventually we'll get some ICs that aren't ridiculously expensive. Also, DDR4 prices are going through the roof right now, and they're expected to keep rising because DDR4 is now used in phones. Now then, let's get on to answering questions and stop listening to me whining about everything that's hard in my life. Actually hard about running this channel, or just problems. Okay, let's talk about something interesting. So, Sempron 145 video, a few people had some questions about that one. And I put those on a piece of paper, and now I can't find it. I am a genius. Where the hell? Nope. Nope. Oh, wait, I remembered one thing that I forgot to mention, not measure. A few people requested a HD7990 PCB breakdown. There's no issue with me getting the photos for that card. It's a case of I can't get any data sheets because that card is one of the last cards ever made using Volterra components. So, and that actually doesn't matter, that it's one of the last cards made with those components, but the problem is Volterra data sheets are non-existent. You can't get them. So I've looked, I can't find any. If some of you manage to acquire some somehow, I'll put in the description the part numbers. I'll drop a comment or a description thing somewhere, the part numbers for the HD7990, because I've tried finding them, can't find them, so I can't do a PCB breakdown without data sheets. It's really that simple. So that card won't be getting done. So that now covers everything as far as the channel content is related. Oh wait, one last thing. This Saturday, I will be live streaming with the RX 480 GTR on LN2. I've finished testing it well, I did some LN2 testing today. The card looks very promising, but it's hard. It's really, really hard to work with. And that's not the GTR's fault. That's just RX 480s are hard to work with. And I'll go into details on that live stream. So, we've almost spent 10 minutes blabbing about channel stuff. Now let's go answer some questions. So, Sempron 145 video. So that's the video, what happens if you raise vCore too far. The point of that video was to show that your CPU will die, even if it doesn't get particularly hot, which the Sempron didn't, but it was still, it was getting into the 50s. You could argue that when I set it to 1.95 volts, it went to over 60 degrees. But really, that's still not really that hot, so not really death by temperature. However, for people who doubt that that killed it, I will be doing another test with a Sempron 145 on LN2 at as low as the Sempron 145 can go. It should be capable of working at minus 196, which is obviously impossible to actually achieve with an LN2 pot because there's a temperature difference across the IHS and the silicon layers, you get the idea. But I can get the Sempron well into, say, minus 180 degrees. And when it's that cold, I'll just do the same thing, smash it with voltage, and we'll see if I can kill it. I am pretty certain I can, because that motherboard goes up to 2.3 volts, and the recommended voltage for 45 nanometer glow flow components at minus 180 is around 1.9. So, I don't have high hopes for that Sempron's lifespan. It's gonna die. On LN2, just to really drive the point home, you can't just cool thing. Like, it's not about temperature. At some point, the voltage alone is enough to kill. So, that's gonna be happening. A few people asked on that video, how would the CPU OC at the voltages I was running through it? Badly, because it's a Sempron 145 and it's limited to FSB overclocking, and it only has a 14x multiplier, and the motherboard I was using is limited to around 320 megahertz FSB. End result, the CPU would probably be between 4.4 and 4.5 gigahertz at around 1.7 volts. Pretty, like, at 1.9 volts it wouldn't clock any higher. It might even clock worse because it was just getting, well, actually no, it wasn't getting hot. So it would just hold that same clock all the way up. Some people asked what would happen, would the CPU die faster if it was overclocked? Theoretically, yes, but I haven't seen a very good test of that yet. I'd love to test it, but the fact of the matter is that the voltage at which a CPU snap dies, like instantly dies, is actually also a bit of random luck, like everything else with silicon, like just the inconsistencies in the manufacturing of the silicon. What part of the CPU actually kills the CPU, like dies and disables the entire chip, is affected by the silicon launch rate. So if you buy 10 Semprons, you're probably going to end up with 10 different voltages at which each of them instantly dies. So really, if you wanted to do a test if clock has a significant effect on when the CPU dies, you would have to buy like 20 Semprons or something, and I don't even know what the statistics are for the average death voltage. If you have a really bad spread where none of the voltages are anywhere near each other, then you're going to have to buy more and more samples until you get something that sort of, you know, has some statistical evidence significance. And then you'd have to do something like 1 gigahertz core clock versus 4 gigahertz core clock and see where they die. And you want that big core clock difference, because otherwise there's a good chance the differences might be just kind of negligible. So I'd love to test that, but realistically I can't do that. I don't have 20 Semprons on hand to just pop like that. So that's sort of that answer. The another question was, what if you used a different CPU with like more cores? Would that die sooner? Theoretically, I have no idea, actually. It just, like, I think, I want to say it doesn't matter how many cores you have, because I really doubt that what ends up dying in the CPU first is something that all of your cores actually push power through. Because essentially what your problem is the current going through the CPU kills it. Now, if the current going, like, if the 4 cores don't actually pull 4 times more current through that part of the CPU that dies, then you should be able to raise the voltage as high as you want, and it wouldn't be an issue. As high as on a single-core CPU, because ultimately it's something that's either inside the cores or not really used that much that just dies. Which is sort of, yeah. So that's going to be my answer to that, but I'm not 100% sure, of course, because that's really going to be affected by how the CPU is designed, and I'm not a CPU architect, so I'm not going to say that definitely one way or another. I suspect it wouldn't make a difference, but again, you'd at least need to test it. So yeah, so that covers everything about the Sempron 145 video. The next thing I would like to sort of update you about is somebody managed to find, well, one of the lovely, actually, hardcore overclocking viewers managed to find a datasheet including the IMVP8 vid table. So the IMVP8 is a VRM specification from Intel for Skylake and Kaby Lake CPUs. So this is tying back to that video where I'm like, no, you can't just shove 1.52 volts through a Kaby Lake because the data sheet says that's the maximum voltage. So today we're going to be taking a look at exactly what that vid table looks like, and you'll see why. Let me just get you onto this screen. Boom, there we go. So this is a RT3606BE. It's a Richtech voltage controller, but anyway, here we have the IMVP8 vid code table. First thing you should note is this is an 8-bit vid. 8-bit vid. So you have 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So you have 8 bits. in it, and it starts at 0.25 volts. So a very basic check is, so so all zeros and 1 1 down here, so hexadecimal 0 1, gives you a voltage of 0.25, 0.25. If I want 5 millivolt increments, because we can see that's exactly what Intel went for, they want 5 millivolt accuracy on their voltage controller, I can only fit 5 millivolts times 255 into this vid table, which means it can't actually exceed 1.52 volts because you run out of data. And that happens right here, FF, 1.52 volts. It's literally a case of this is where the VRM's capabilities end. So Intel doesn't actually test at this voltage. It's just a case of if we ever wanted to make a CPU with a 1.5 with a really, really high vid, theoretically, well, no, it has to be below 1.52 volts because there's no way we're getting a working vid otherwise. So yeah, that's why that ends at 1.52 volts. It really is a case of it's a software limitation. It's not like Intel went and tested that the CPUs would die that voltage or something. It's just like, well, the software doesn't go higher. And mind you, this is the same vid table that they use for VR12, VR11.1, and a bunch of other older sort of VRM specifications. So they've been pretty much sticking to this vid table for a while now. I think there's like I think before VR 11.1, there was a vid table that went to 1.6, but I also think it started a bit higher on the minimum voltage. So yeah, now if Facebook could stop spamming me, that'd be great. Next piece of news. Ugh, I totally forgot where we're going. Right, news. Now let's get on to some sort of hardware news. So Gigabyte announces its overclocking season for 2017. And overall, there's going to be $10,000 worth of prizes in the form of hardware, as well as gift cards. They are doing gift cards. And this is just super awesome, in my opinion. Like, these competitions that Gigabyte has scheduled are really, really cool. They're very open. The only requirements is you have to have a Gigabyte motherboard, because it's a Gigabyte competition. You know, it's like you don't go to... This is not like a general competition for everybody. This is a Gigabyte competition. So if you have a Gigabyte motherboard, you can join these competitions, and the limitations are pretty cool. Everything except the Summer Spectacular, so that's the competition starting in May 1st of this year and then ending in May 31st. So Summer Spectacular, everything else is limited to 4-core CPUs, unless stated otherwise. Summer Spectacular is limited to an i3-7350K and a GT730. So it looks like Gigabyte was inspired by the last year's cheap as chips competition, which was made by HardwareBot, and that was a competition where HardwareBot it was basically GT710s, and the only requirement was that the cards, I think the requirements was that the cards had to be modified and they had to be on sub-ambient or something like that. So basically, cheap as chips last year was a competition to get people to learn how to vault mod. Summer Spectacular looks really, really similar because we're talking about an i3-7350K, which is the cheapest of the overclockable Intel Kaby Lake CPUs. And so it's you know, I mean, it is still an expensive CPU. The i3-7350K is not dirt cheap, but it is a lot cheaper than like an i7-7700K, and the GT730 is, in my opinion, the sort of point where you go, yep, this is dirt cheap. So that is, in my opinion, a really awesome competition that you should join, because that's going to be insane fun. It's probably going to require, like, it's going to be sub-ambient. If you want to start doing, like, competitive sub-ambient overclocking, that's a really good starting point, because that's an i3 and a GT730. That's going to be awesome. I am definitely joining that one. There is no way I'm not joining it. So, yeah. And then we have the other ones, which is April Extreme Clocking. So that's going to be full all-out LN2. And then there's Beat the Heat, which they've been doing for several years now, I think, which will be, again, an LN2 competition. So very, very fun competitions by the looks of it. They are all limited to Intel. Well, no, they say 4-core processors. I wonder if they might not allow 4-core Ryzen CPUs for some of these. I really wonder about that, but right now it looks like it's going to be all 4-core Intel. So, continuing sort of the trend of Gigabyte overclocking competitions, we have Gigabyte March OC Madness, and I'm highlighting this one because this one is awesome. Check out these freaking rules. So, general contest rules. Only use Gigabyte motherboards or Aorus boards, so Gigabyte boards, because it's a Gigabyte competition. Okay, it doesn't really need a lot of thought. There's only commercially available hardware, so the competition is open to everyone. That's a really big thing here. Is where is it? Open to all leagues. That right there means that even people, well, I can join. Any beginner can join. Any super professional overclocker like, say, Kingpin or DanCop or you know, really, really good overclockers, they can also join. There's no restrictions on who can and can't join. However, people like Kingpin and DanCop, and they have access often to engineering sample hardware, which isn't, you can't buy that stuff, and it's not really fair to go into a competition with it that isn't limited to people who are all capable of acquiring that kind of hardware. So Gigabyte says you have to use commercially available CPUs, so that's one restriction to sort of try level the playing field a little bit. And the other restriction is that none of the Gigabyte LN2 edition motherboards are allowed in the competition, which is a big deal because those are a bunch of super, like, experimental motherboards from Gigabyte. Like, they're super awesome. I might do a video about one of them because I did get to see one of those in person. They're just awesome, awesome motherboards from Gigabyte. Focused on LN2, of course, and they're not really fair if you bring them to a competition because you can't buy those either. They were never like, the only way you're getting one of those is if you ask Gigabyte for one of them and they decide that, yes, you're worthy of owning one, and then they'll send you one. The other way is that somebody who got sent one gives it to you, but sells it to you or gives it to you. There's no other way to get these boards, so those are also banned. Now then, let's go over the other limitations. You're limited to 4 cores, so i7-17100K, but this is cool. There's no restriction about Kaby Lake or anything, so you can use a 7700K, or if you're on a 2600K, you can use one of those too. Or at least that's as far as I understand the rules. So you can literally come in with any 4-core CPU, including i5s, i7s, anything, and you can join. You won't necessarily win, because obviously an i7 is going to curb stomp an i5. There's no thread count restriction. There's just a core count restriction. And so an i7 is allowed to run with hyperthreading. High-end desktop platforms are not allowed. So X79 and X99 not allowed. I know there is an X79 4-core, but you still can't join with one of those. I'm not sure if 1366 is high-end desktop. It probably is. So if you have an i7-920 or something like that, you can't join either. But I would recommend asking to get the rules clarified on the discussion page of the thing. So you can actually go here, discussions. So basically, it's open to everybody on a mainstream Intel platform with 4 cores. And the clock for every single freaking stage is limited to 5 gigahertz. You cannot go above 5 gigahertz on any of the benchmarks, which is really, really cool because it means that even if you have it, like, anybody with a Kaby Lake CPU is able to do 5 gigahertz for benchmarks. Based on the fact that Silicon Lottery publishes their statistics for i7-17100K binning, and they said that 59% of their CPUs are able to do 5 gigahertz. So if you have an AIO or a big, big dual tower heatsink, like a top-end air cooler, you can definitely join this competition and have a chance, at least in terms of CPU speed, you have a chance at winning, because everybody's going to be limited to 5 gigahertz, which means what you really have to focus on in this competition is memory overclocking, which is hard, but it also means that it's not going to be, like, it's easier to get good memory, and it's also going to be about tweaking your system, so operating system, and making sure that everything is running as efficient as possible, which means that the competition is very, very sort of level. You're not going to see somebody come in with like a water-cooled i7 that can do 5.6 gigahertz. Those exist. Admittedly, they do it at like 1.6 volts, but they exist, and it's not really fair when you meet somebody with one of those in a competition, because they're just going to curb stomp you. They don't need to know how to time their RAM better, they don't need to know how to do anything better than you, they just have 5.6 gigahertz on their CPU, and you're not touching that. Especially in the benchmarks selected for a competition like this, so let's talk about those now. Stage 1, Time Spy Physics. Stage 2, Geekbench 3 Multicore. Stage 4 is XTU, and Stage 3 is X265. So these two use AVX extensions. This, I'm not sure, I've never run it. Time Spy Physics, this will be very... This is just a generic CPU benchmark. So it looks like a really nice lineup of 4 multi-core benchmarks. So I definitely recommend participating. You can run... This one is free. You can run it free as long as you have internet enabled. This one is also free. This one's free. This one I think you might have to buy 3D Mark. So that's the only one where you might have to spend some money. And now let's look at the prize pool, which is also really, really great. So if you win first place, you pretty much get a, you know, mid-range, I don't know, like upper mid-range gaming rig. You get an i7-7700K, a Gaming 7 motherboard, so the Z270X Gaming 7, and you get an RX 480 Wind Force. So pretty much you get a gaming rig right there. Boom. Of course, getting first place in this competition is going to be really, really hard because it is open season for anybody to join. Second place, you can get a Gaming 7 motherboard, an i5, and some really nice memory from G-Skill. This memory kit, if you give it enough voltage, should be capable of doing almost 4,000 12, or more, or slightly less. Really depends. Silicon Lottery, you get the idea. Third place, Gigabyte Z270 UD5, so a nice motherboard, an 850 watt power supply from an Urmax, and a AIO cooler. And then down here in the lucky draw, which is the reason why everybody should join, if you have a 4-core, there's good reason to join here, because you can win that lucky prize draw. And the lucky prize draw is a Gaming 7 motherboard, an open bench table, a mechanical mouse and keyboard, mechanical keyboard, and a mouse from G-Skill. The keyboard is RGB if you care about that. There's also a Heroes of the Storm codes, 5 of those, and there's a Steam code for $50. So this is really, really good to start off 2017 as far as competitions go. And I just thought I'd point this out because this is really, really open. You just need a Gigabyte motherboard, 4-core CPU, and you can go to town on it. So yeah, very much worth joining. I want to try join it. I don't have currently a Gigabyte motherboard for any of my 4-core Intel CPUs. I have an AMD motherboard, but I can't run XTU on AMD. So that's a bit of an issue. So yeah. Oh wait, they say 1, 2, or 4 processor cores for this one. Wait a minute. 1, 2, 4. 1, 2, 4. 1, 2, 4. Okay, so you can actually join with i3s and Pentiums and Celerons and anything. You can join with your toaster as long as it runs a Gigabyte motherboard and it's an Intel CPU. So yeah, it's actually more open than I thought. Really, really good idea to join because, well, free stuff. Like literally, you don't even have to push that hard to get a chance for the lucky prize draw. And, you know, if you're interested in picking up a few points for your hardware bot leader, well, hardware bot ladder, this is also a good way to do that. So I really recommend joining this. And now this is really, really long, so this is 30 minutes. I think we'll pack it in here. What do you say? I need to figure out how to get more hardware news and competitions. I do think that I'm going to do competition highlights as competitions run. So I'm going to start trying to pay more attention to like the competition side of hardware bot because I personally just like grinding the ladder, which the ladder being, you know, you have the hardware points, the global points and all that. And I just enjoy going like, yeah, I'm going to work on this graphics card and I'm going to work on that and doing whatever. But sometimes you know, here and there's a competition where I just go like, oh my God, I really need to join this just because, well, this one is from Gigabyte is a case of I'm really happy that Gigabyte made such an open competition. So I, you know, want to, you technically sort of support Gigabyte's decision to run these competitions by just joining. So that's one reason why I want to join that one. And the other thing is, the there is that Summer Spectacular competition, which is just awesome, which I really can't wait to do. So I will be doing highlights of how competitions are going and trying to do that. I'll try also, yeah, basically it'll be competition updates, hardware news, and channel updates, Q&A. That's sort of the goal for this. I'm not sure how I'll balance the time. I think I want to aim for about 30 minutes, which we're just about to cross over. Is there anything? I announced the RX 480 LN2 livestream for this Saturday. Yes, I did. So yeah, that's that for this. There's a comment section down below where you can complain about how I ramble too much and don't really make much sense. You can also say, you know, give your suggestions for what you would like to see in this segment, because this is very much a case of I want it to be a new segment for you guys, because I can read Reddit on my own, as well as, you know, check websites all on my own. What else is there? Oh, right, you can also, there's a small chance that I might make this a live stream, so that's a thing. This piece of hair needs to go. Stay. So there's a small chance that I might make this a sort of weekly or bi-weekly live stream where we just sort of talk. But the problem is, if it's live, then I want to have a co-host. Not that there's any practice behind this one, but it's just like, it's awkward to just, you know, not be talking, to be talking to an audience, not really, like, I just don't like that, okay? So basically, that's it. I think at this point I've rambled enough, so you probably want me to just shut up. I want my social media to shut up. And thank you for watching. There's a like button. You can press that if you liked it. There's a dislike button if there's anything you didn't like. Drop a comment. I don't want you sharing this. That's a terrible idea, unless somebody dedicated something where it's just like Buildzoid content, so you could share it there, but don't share it with the general public. There's other videos on the channel that are, in my opinion, much better candidates for being shared with the general public, as people need to be informed about PCB quality. And what is there else? Right, I run a Patreon if you would like to help out the channel. So yeah, I mean, Ryzen is only really, me getting Ryzen at all is pretty much only possible due to all the Patreons, so huge shout out to those. And if you would like to help out the channel, there's a Patreon. There's also, if you don't like Patreon, there's the option to just donate to me directly through PayPal. Also, one thing I keep forgetting to announce, if you want to send me stuff, okay, if you want to send me your old GPUs and old stuff like that, you can now. Well, you should be able to now. I've worked something out where you're not sending it directly to me because, you know, the whole issue of me giving away my real address. So I've worked something out. So if you want to send me something, send me a private message on YouTube or Facebook, or you can send an email to buildzoid@gmail.com or whatever, and we can discuss the details of sending me stuff. If you want to send stuff, and it will get violated in any way, shape, or form that you find desirable, as long as it includes really, really high clocks. And what else was there as far as the shipping? Right. Don't offer old stuff, like really old stuff. Like rare hardware I'll grab, but if it's a reference HD 5540 or something really miserable like that, don't bother, because the shipping on that probably costs more than it would cost me to just buy it locally. And that's just a waste of everybody's time as far as I'm concerned. So, yeah. Also, I will not do, you send it to me, I send it back. I'm not doing loaners, because, just with, like, if it gets broken in shipping, if it, you know, if anything goes wrong with it, or I break it on a live stream, or I break it doing something like volt modding it or something, which, truth be told about my volt modding skills, it looks like I know what I'm doing, but the fact of the matter is while I'm holding that soldering pen, the only thing I feel like is like a medieval surgeon, where it's a case of, oh, your leg has an infection, we'll just cut your whole leg off, you know? That's kind of my level of soldering capabilities. They're not that good. So I'm not going to mod stuff for you, but if you want to send something in to see it get destroyed because you don't have the capabilities to do it yourself, go right ahead. I'm very open to that option. So that is that at this point. I've covered everything I wanted to say, and now we can actually say goodbye and see you next time.